This podcast is sponsored by Bigger Brains, online training that won't bore you to tears. Expand the minds of your workforce at getbiggerbrains.com.
Welcome to Permission to Speak, the video blog and podcast that loiters at the intersection of leaders who want their people to speak up, technology that facilitates connections, and results that serve our higher purpose. Now, here's your host, Kelly Vandever.
Hi, welcome to the podcast. I'm Kelly Vandever. Our special guest here today is Kevin Jones of vinjones.com. He's a consultant, a speaker, an entrepreneur, and he helps organizations reimagine and design a work environment where employees are completely engaged and therefore a lot more productive. And he's a pretty productive guy himself. He has more than 45 videos on YouTube, and his YouTube channel is Vin Jones Videos. The videos are a mix of perspective and advice and interviews. My favorite, though, is on the 9th day.
Is it?
It is. I like the blend of poignancy and the funny that's in there too. He also has a great podcast called The Secrets of the Engaged Employee. So check that out on iTunes. He's the co-author of the ebook Changing the World of Work and the author of 15 Ways to Fail at Social Business. Kevin's worked with organizations like NASA, AT&T, Lowe's, JCPenney's, and Dell to help them engage their employees using social tools and practical advice. And now we have him on our podcast. Yay! Welcome, Kevin.
So good to be here. Thank you.
Well, we like our folks to get to know our interviewees before we delve into the deep, rich content stuff. So I've got a couple quirky questions to ask you first. I don't know what he's going to say, but here's those questions, and let's hear your answers. The first one is, what is your favorite possession?
My favorite possession, I would have to say, I don't know if this sounds cliche or whatever, but it's my family for sure. I have 8 kids.
See, you gotta tell everybody that, right? Say that again in case they missed it.
8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And I have a superwoman for a wife. And if you could call that a possession, that would be my most valued possession.
Your most favorite thing in the world, huh?
Yeah, when I'm not working, it's with them.
That's awesome. I love a family man and 8 kids. That's
8
crazy.
Kids, yeah. Yeah.
All right. Getting a little bit of reverb. I'm not sure. There we go. Let's see if that helps. So the second quirky question is, tell us something surprising about yourself that most people don't know.
I have 8 kids.
That's surprising, clearly.
That's usually a shocker right there. I was at the NSA convention.
National Speakers.
It was last year.
National Speakers Association, not the other guys.
Yes. Well, didn't want to say that, but yeah. So I was at that convention last year, and I was sitting at a table, and this lady said, "You know what? It's so good to have young people like you in NSA." And she went on and on and on. And I said, "So how old do you think I am?" And she said, wait, let me guess. 31. No, 29. I said, "I have 8 kids." And then, her mouth just dropped open. And I thought, you know what? I guess this is a good problem to have, but when I need to look like I know what I'm doing, then being 29, 31 doesn't cut it, because you think, they don't know that much. So that's why I shaved my head. So I need to look older. So there's my one surprising thing about me that people don't know. Oh, that's why I shaved my head.
That is hilarious. Okay, thank you for sharing
that. I have 8 kids. I could be a grandfather in 2 years. So no, and no, I didn't get started when I was 14 either. So.
Oh, perfect. Okay, awesome. So done with the quirky questions. Now a
Great.
little more
Okay.
thought-provoking.
All right.
And that would be, what's your story? What happened in your life? What took place that made you care about this idea of the engaged employee?
Good question. When I started my career, I was focused on training. I loved training, and that's part of why I joined NSA, National Speakers Associations, because I love to be in front of groups and crowds and help them learn things that they didn't know. And so that's always been a passion of mine for a long time. So I started off in training, and then I learned that above training, training is really a subset of learning. And when I started branching out even more, I started realizing that learning is a subset of performance improvement. Performance improvement is a subset, and you can just keep going. And really it gets to, and I don't want to say the top level, but it really does come down to having engaged employees. And I was, earlier in my career, I was in Portland, as I am now. We've come back, and now we're in Portland again. But in Portland, Oregon, and I would work for companies, and it was during the recession. It was a real tough time in training. Training is the first one to be laid off. So I was laid off a number of times in different companies, and I thought, oh, okay, is it me? Is it whatever? But during those times, I was able to go through a number of companies, excuse me, and see how they all worked and how they all functioned. And I was amazed at the difference between not only individual people, but individual groups within these companies and how they functioned. And some of them were high functioning and did really well. Other ones were toxic, and I didn't want to touch them with a 10-foot pole. And then as I started getting into more consulting, I would watch people walk around in the companies that I would start working with, and I label them as work zombies because they just go about doing their work, and that's about it.
Right.
And that's really the essence of the engaged or disengaged employee. If we split it up, it's about 30% are engaged at work, right? And then about 25% is actively disengaged and trying to subvert the company. And then everything in between is that employee that's just there for the paycheck. And I took this job because it was the best one I could find. It's not really what I want to do, but it is, we are here. So when I saw that, I started really feeling for those employees because I do what I love. I absolutely love what I do, and I want more people to do that. I don't want them to go to work for 10 hours a day and just tolerate it.
Right.
So that's how I got my passion has come into how do I help people love what they do. And really, if that's my goal, then it's really working with organizations to create an environment to allow them to get to that point.
Good. And so if you're helping employees love what they do, helping organizational leaders get to that point, how did you get into this area? Because I know you work with companies on some of the social tools that are out there. How did that process come about?
So again, I was in the training piece, and I went to a conference years ago, 2005, maybe 2006. And I started learning about social tools there. It was really in its infancy, not only in social tools, period, but especially social tools within an organization.
Yeah.
And so I started learning about it, and I caught on just like I was on fire. That really got me going. And as I started talking to people about it, they looked at me like I was crazy because it was really bucking the trend of what we normally do. And it's completely different. It's a completely different way of working. But I knew, I could feel that this was right, that this was the way to go, the way to help engage employees and really get them into their work and help them love what they do. One aspect of it, I guess. And then And so I started getting into that more, and then I started consulting with companies doing that. But again, that is a subset of helping employees work well overall, performance improvement, and the engaged employee. That's only one thing that you can do, which is a great thing, right, if a company can do it. And so just really from that, I really started diving into the engaged employee and helping create those environments.
So you work with organizations using some of the social tools, but you use old school techniques too, or what?
Oh yes, absolutely. In fact, one of the things I'm developing right now is what I call the Change Agent Program, and it's creating a program for the employees to help create change at their company, rather than it always coming from the top down. Really giving the employees the know-how and the empowerment to do that and change it from there. And so in that, for example, when I go and work with a company, it's not just, okay, let's go put in a enterprise social network. It's, let's figure out what makes you guys tick. And that involves interviews, whether it's me doing the interviews or other people doing the interviews. It involves the design, the human-centered design process, which Ideo created, if you're familiar with Ideo. Mm-hmm. They created the human-centered design process, and that is good not only for products, but it's also good for creating cultures as well, or changing cultures in a way. And so ethnography, a lot of different old school techniques that I'm bringing in as well. And then the tools, the technological tools, are there to help, but they're not the mainstay at all.
Gotcha. So I'm not familiar with ethnography.
Ethnography.
What is that?
Yeah, it's really the study of a culture, and when you do. When I say, I'm going to say this wrong, but when you do ethnography, you're going in without really any preconceived ideas. And it's more, instead of trying to figure out why something is working, you're just trying to figure out what's working or what's not working. It's kind of an open book, and you go in with a certain methodology and you just learn about it. And then it becomes very, very apparent to you what is working, what isn't working. And because you don't have those biases at first, you're not slanted one way or the other. So you're able to discover more, you may say.
Gotcha. So how does your typical engagement work? What was something recently, or some of your early engagements, and how did that pan out for some of the cool folks that you've worked with?
Right. Oh boy, so many. Okay.
If you can't mention names, you can mention some generalities or something like that. Yeah.
Okay. One company I worked for, the president said basically, my employees are not taking initiative. How do we come help me figure out how to get them to take initiative? And so I went there and I met with their executive team, and we went through a number of things about how about their culture first. And once they understood, and once we dove into their culture and helped them kind of verbalize what it's like at the company, because a lot of these things go unsaid, even at the executive level.
Right.
There aren't too many hardcore discussions around culture within a company. There may be side conversations here and there. Okay, let's talk about this piece of culture, but not culture overall,
right,
as a holistic subject. So once we get going with that, they realize, okay, we really do need some help. Because honestly, at first, when the president said, let's have this guy come in, they're like, do we have to? But after we had this, it was about a 2-hour discussion, they said, you know what? Okay, I get it. You're right. We need to make some changes. Let's figure this out. And so I did a number of interviews with people all over the company, top to bottom, to find out what's happening. And looked at some of the things that they're doing and some of the data that they had already, kind of put it all together and realized that because of the way the company was set up, it made it really, really difficult for employees to take initiative and to do things of their own free will and just get out there and go do it. And that's what the president was wanting. He wanted the employees to just go get a good idea and go and do it. But there were some things that actually he put in place that would stop it. Not only procedural things, but also mindset type things where they were afraid to do it. And so there was some coaching on, okay, they're not doing it because you created this culture of, and so we had to kind of work through that. And it was difficult. That isn't an easy thing to do. Anytime you're dealing with culture, it is really a difficult thing to really face. I mean, it's kind of like looking at yourself in the mirror and saying, what doesn't work about me? And admitting that's kind of...
Yeah, it's kind of hard to call the baby ugly or whatever, analogy you want to use. Yeah.
That's right. But at the same time, you're taking advantages of the strengths. So you're doing both at the same time.
Well, that's so talk more about that, about the strengths part of it.
Well, every company has their strengths and weaknesses. And the way I look at it is we can focus on the weaknesses, and try to make those better, which is a good thing. But if we focus on the things that are good and make them even greater, they will a lot of times alleviate the things that are holding us back. I did recently, as part of the Change Agent program that I'm putting together, I worked with a group that we did a number of interviews, and what we found, and we asked them through a series of questions, but basically said, what engages you? When you go home at the end of the day and you're excited and fired up even more than when you started, what did that day look like? And then also on the opposite side, when you went home and you were completely drained and you didn't feel like going back the next day, what did that day look like? And so we got a whole bunch of responses, and we asked the managers this. And we also asked the managers, how do you engage your employees? And so what we found is that we could put them into 3 buckets. The first bucket is things that disengage employees. You can say disengage, demotivate, disempower, a whole bunch of different terms, but basically in that same bucket. And it's the typical things you would think of, belittle. If you belittle someone else, that will do it. If you take away certain types of freedom, if there's fear of failure, you just go on and on and on. But then when what engages you, that was split out into 2 buckets. So if we look at...
Before you go there, so when you're talking about the things that demotivate, were some of those managers saying that they thought those were things that would engage the employee?
Yeah, good question. No. They all agree. I'm glad you asked that. They all agree basically on what demotivates employees, and even managers. What demotivates me, they could spout all day about that, right? Because they're in the same spot.
Right.
So what we did then is split the engage part into 2 buckets, and 1 bucket alleviates disengagement. The next bucket actually creates engagement. And so if you want to look at these 3 buckets, on the left you have -1, in the middle you have 0, and then on the right you have +1. And to get us from -1 to 0 are certain types of actions, but doing those actions don't actually get us to 1.
Yes, yeah.
And so what we found is that the employees all said the things that are in bucket 1. The managers talked about bucket 0.
No, really?
Yes. Now here's this was fascinating, and I love this, and I've done this, and I've seen this happen over and over and over again. What the managers are trying to do, and I don't want to disparage managers in any way, because honestly, I think that they have a crazy difficult job.
Right.
Trying to run the business and the people at the same time, and the process, it just overwhelming. So I can completely understand this. What we found is that the 0 bucket were things like so when we asked, how do you engage your employees, or how are you engaged? Those things were throw a party, give awards, have childcare, do drive by. I mean, walk the floor, and management by walking around.
Right.
Things like that we all go, okay, yeah, you need to have those things. But really, all that does is alleviate disengagement. It doesn't create engagement, but it alleviates disengagement. Then when we ask the employees what really engages you, they're saying things like, allow me to fail, trust me.
Nice.
They weren't talking about programs anymore. The programs of, let's have an awards ceremony. They weren't talking about the ceremonial type things. They were talking about the characteristics of the culture, the characteristics of the environment. Give me the freedom to, and have a whole list of those kind of things. Now, the funny thing is, though, is that when this really tipped it off. When I talked with one particular department manager before all of this, he was saying that when he was trying to create change, when he was trying to get something done, he was so sick of the politics. He was so sick of the processes and policies put in place that made it difficult for him to do his job. And so really what he was talking about is the one bucket, the engagement bucket, and saying, clear the politics out of the way, clear the unnecessary rules and guidelines out of the way, and I can be engaged. I want to be engaged. But then when I talked to him as a department manager, he went back in his role as a manager to the zero position and said, well, the way you engage employees is to throw parties, is to give out awards. And it clicked that this is role-based. If my role as a manager is, in my role as a manager, I think what I'm trying to do is alleviate disengagement. But as an employee, step out of the management role for a minute and go to employee, my set of engagement criteria are completely different. And so that's what I try to focus on, are these things. We have to have these center things, good benefits. If you don't, you're going to create disengagement. You have to have those basic things. It's kind of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Right.
So if you have those basic things, let's focus on these great things, and it'll naturally take things away from the disengagement piece and bring them up to the engagement. So that's a long explanation of all that, but it was absolutely fascinating to me.
So is that company still in the process of getting to that +1? Do they get it, or where's that?
Yeah, they are in the process, and they are trying. It's a big organization, and trying to turn around a big organization where you have middle managers who have fought for power, and they have gone their whole careers fighting for power, and then all of a sudden we say, let's change some things. They're like, whoa, no, I don't want to give up the power that I've already worked so hard for, and I can understand that. But we're trying to make that change, and really part of it is being able to give authority and power to the employees to do the jobs the right way. And that does mean it takes it away from sometimes the middle managers, and that can be difficult.
Have you had any successes yet where you can go, but look at the difference, look at the delta and the great productivity or improvements or things like that have come from letting them have those +1 things?
Yes, there are so many little ones. I could give example after example of things where managers kind of let go and said, you guys do it, and they took off and did it. A bigger one, I will mention, not when I was working with NASA, because I still am, but working with NASA, they had this problem that they were trying to figure out, and none of the engineers could figure it out, and it's a big deal. It had to do with CubeSats, which are the small satellites that they launch out into space, and there are over 100 of those are launched by the International Space Station itself. And so they're trying to figure out the thrusting, how the thrusting worked on Earth with gravity. How do you do that in outer space? Because every time you can't take the payload that they have, and take it to a vacuum chamber, it just is cost prohibitive. So how do we do that? The engineers couldn't figure it out, and management couldn't figure it out. So they said, you know what? Forget it. Let's just completely open this up to anyone who has any ideas about it, and we will give them the money. We'll just say, you go for it, you figure it out. And that's what they did. And the solution came in 2 weeks. Actually, 3 different solutions came. One of them, and they were all within 2 weeks, but one of them was top notch, and it just worked. And they were amazed that by just letting control and saying, instead of trying to keep it all closed in, because a lot of times, if you can't figure out something for a year or 2 years, you don't want people to know about that.
Right.
Yeah. You want to keep that a secret. Oh my goodness, that's not good press for your group. But they just opened it up and said, you know what? Don't care. We just want the problem solved. Who can do this? And people came forward and said, I've got an idea. And it was pure brilliance. Watching that whole process was incredible.
Wow.
So there's an example of just saying, go do it, figure it out. And the employees actually do it. And actually, they did it mostly on their time off.
Really?
Yeah. It wasn't part of their day job. They just thought, you know what? I'm kind of intrigued by that. And they went home, and on the weekend, they put some prototypes together and figured it out and said, look at that. It was amazing. It was really neat.
We should just stop right there. I mean, that's just like the perfect story. Oh my gosh,
it was so neat.
Amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I am curious about the stuff you've written about social business and some of your experiences in that realm. Even though it's been around a little longer now, it's still fairly new to a lot of organizations.
Sure.
So maybe you can just give kind of an overview of what that entails, what you've seen, what you've worked with, and then I'll ask you some more, questions about examples or things that can help our watchers, our listeners, to learn more in that area.
Good. Okay. So I see a lot of times when people think about social business, they think about the technology. And really, as far as I'm concerned, it's about 10% technology, 90% people and culture. Because I've seen people put in the technology and no one use it because of the culture. And I've seen cultures who are ready to use it actually start using forms of it before the company allows them to use it. And so it's not to say that, so for example, I'll go back to NASA. NASA's culture that I was dealing with, at least, is not incredibly open. And I want to be careful on that, because there are pockets that really, really are and pockets that really, really aren't. But overall, the groups that I was working with, they weren't incredibly open. And so really what happened was a group of interns came in and started using social technologies to work. And the managers said, and they did it on their own servers. And so the managers said, you need to let me in. I need to see what's going on. And they said, no, we don't. And they said, no, yes, you need to let us in. And I said, no, we don't. And it went back and forth and back and forth. So they went to IT, and the CIO took a look at it and said, actually, no, they don't. They don't need to let you in because it's on a private server somewhere else. They shouldn't be doing work, and we need to let them know that. But if they do, we'll never know. That's a problem. And so that's what got them into seriously looking at social technologies. And that's when I came in and started helping them. But really, their culture wasn't completely ready for it. So that's a lot of what I did, is work on the culture piece of it to help people be ready for it when it came. And when it did come, how do you change the way you work? Because it is a totally different way of working. In fact, with NASA now, I have a NASA email address, and I almost never use it. Almost never use the email, where other people are tied to their email. And it's liberating not to use email. It's wonderful. I love it. And it is much more open. People can say things that they haven't been able to say in the past.
What do you mean? Why?
Um, Someone asks a question, they may be able to say it one-on-one personally to someone, but now they have a forum really to say, this is the way I see it. A lot of times those things are the elephant in the room.
Mm.
And it really doesn't create a new paradigm, a new way of a new attitudes. What it does is social business brings out the already established attitudes. It doesn't create anything new. It just brings it out so that anyone can see, wow, this is really what we're doing. Really? I had no idea that people felt this way. Or people are, working on this. For example, it can be either an attitude or one department working on something and department B working on something else, and realizing that they're working on sister projects and they could share with each other. And so, and the managers, and I've seen this before, those managers want to separate them as much as possible because of political territory turf wars. But when they skip over the managers and find each other, then they start collaborating and it takes off from there. And so there's a lot of political stuff in there, political and cultural things that you need to look at, which is partly why I wrote the 15 ways to fail at social business, because I've seen, and I've done those. I mean, those are my experiences. I have to admit, this, is very early on where we all thought, for example, one of those is that age is a good determination of whether or not you'll use these technologies, and it has nothing to do with it. But a lot of people think, the young people coming in, they get it. That doesn't mean that they'll use it. Yeah. And that's very, very different. Just because they get it and may be predisposed to it doesn't mean that they'll actually use it. And so I started getting into adoption strategies, adoption of technology, and have created some things around how do you get people to adopt not only technology, but maybe a certain mindset as well. And so social technologies really brings out the culture and allows and gives some of the power and authority, if you want to say that, to each of the employees rather than having it in a more hierarchical fashion.
Nice. Something you said triggered a thought in my head, and then I kept listening, and then let me see if I can remember what it was. No. So, do those middle managers, or do those managers eventually come around, like the managers you talk about, where the teams find themselves, but the managers might want to try to keep them separate? Have you seen people like come around because they've seen the results? They've seen a better, product and productivity.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, working with one group right now where one of the middle managers didn't want anything to do with the system, didn't want them to post anything on there. In fact, actively said, "Do not do that," which goes against everything that we're trying to do.
Right.
And through working with this person again and again and again, this person finally came back, I think it was a couple weeks ago, and said, I don't want to use email anymore. I want everything on the collaborative network. I want all the discussions, all documentation, everything there. No more email, period. I want everything out in the open. I want us to know what we're doing back and forth. And it was, whoa, okay, I'll take it. That's wonderful. So absolutely, there can be huge changes for the better like that.
Do you know what it was that threw him off there, that changed his mind so drastically?
It was a combination of not being able to see directly into each group that this person was managing. You can talk with the group lead, with the team lead, and get kind of a sense for it, but even the team lead is a filter.
Sure.
Right? And so when you talk to 3, 4, 5 team leads, you don't have a lot of time to delve into their people and ask them what's going on. And then when so many things are hitting them in the face that they're blindsided by, then they say, open it all up. I want to see everything. And then they can pick and choose. That person talks about what's really going on. I'm going to follow that person and get the updates on that person. And then they can be much more targeted. They're not going to be inundated with all of it, because you can filter those kind of things out, but you can be very targeted and pick up on things that you would have never picked up on before.
Nice. So it's like they get more trusted advisors.
Yes, absolutely. And they do start placing different parts of trust into the employees themselves, because they realize, wow, they understand it. They get it. You know what? I don't need to do this part. I can give it to them. They would be happy. They're begging for it, but I've always kept it in close to my chest so that I can control things. I don't need to, because I really understand that they get it. There you go. And that engages the employees, and you just take off from there.
Right. I've always said control is an illusion.
Yes.
Letting go is better. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, let me think. So what have been some of your biggest surprises, your biggest aha moments, the things that went way better than you expected as you've been on this journey with the culture, the tools, with the human behavior? What have been some of your takeaways, your aha moments?
Right. So when I talked about work zombies before, I was kind of the mindset that people are just beaten down, and they don't want to give it another try, because that's a lot of what I would heard. And as I've done more research into that and interviews, et cetera, I'm finding that given another chance, they really do. They would really jump into it. That not as many people are beaten down as I thought, not permanently beaten down.
Wow.
There are some, but they are just riding along because they honestly don't feel that there's another option. And so if given the chance, they would really, they would go for it. Where I felt that at first, they just, that's the way they were, and they were comfortable with it, and forget it, I'm not going to do it, and they've given up. But they really haven't. And so that gave me an extra spark of, I want to help them get to that point where they're really loving what they do. And some people say employee engagement, the term, is all about managers trying to get more out of their employees. And I don't feel that way. In fact, I just wrote, I really feel it's creating, and I've had to kind of really put this down on paper and really, really think about it, but it's more creating an environment. Employee engagement is about creating an environment where employees can thrive, allowing them to do their best, giving them, instead of capping them out and saying, you'll stop here, kind of lifting that cap and letting them go. And when you do that, they will come alive. It's amazing. I'll just share a quick story. I was talking with a VP of a company who told me of a lady that they were employing that was in one position, and they wanted to fire her. She was not doing well. She was toxic. It was a bad situation. But they didn't feel that they could really fire her or lay her off or whatever. So they said, okay, let's kind of shuffle her to another department. She got over to the other department and took off. Just all of a sudden, it's like, who is this woman? This is incredible. She got out of an environment that was kind of stifling her and put in an environment that worked for her. And she took off, got promoted, and just went on to be incredible and loved her job. Complete attitude change, complete work change, everything. And that's what I want to see.
Well, I think, I guess because I had a manager's hat on for so many years, one, hearing you say that, I think creates a lot of hope in people that are in those jobs, or even for managers that have people they feel are just the working zombies. So I love that creation of hope. But with the manager hat on, I
Hmm.
I also think it's important for managers to understand that it's not just about trying to have happy employees for the sake of happy employees.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
happy employees isn't the goal. The goal is to get the best out of everybody so that the organization thrives and can better serve their customers or meet their mission. And um, so, can you speak to that? What are
Yeah.
your thoughts there?
Yeah. So if we look at a traditional organization, the goal is to maximize shareholder value, right? You want, right?
Sorry.
Exactly. Exactly. But I mean, really, if you don't, as a manager, you're going to get fired,
Right.
right? So that needs to happen. But I think that the focus can be on something else and have that happen as a result,
Hmm.
rather than focusing on that.
I think that's
Um,
key. That's really key what you said there.
yes,
Yeah.
I call it the umbrella principle, where you focus on something of a higher order level, and everything underneath it, it gets taken care of, just because you're taking care of the higher order principles. Um, so yes, do we need our employees to be productive? Absolutely. Am I going to focus on that? Well, you can, or you can create an environment that allows your employees to be productive. And part of that is giving up that, or what others may see is giving up that control, whether you have that control or not. Again, that goes back to the whole control discussion.
Right.
Um, but if we're trying to maximize shareholder value, there's a normal path that we go down. If we are trying, however, to fulfill a deeper purpose, then the maximizing shareholder value will naturally happen if we're focused on that higher order.
Right.
That's going to happen. If we hire employees that have a similar mission, that want to do something like that as well, and they're on board, then that's even better. If we get employees that really don't care what the mission is, I just want a job, that's difficult. Then you have to go back to that zero position. And okay, let me give you awards. Let me give you something to try to get more work out of you. And I guess that's part of what managers are always trying to do: get more work out of their employees. But if they focused on the purpose and creating that environment, they're not focused on getting work out of their employees, because it will naturally happen.
Right. Right.
And so the focus on the purpose is undervalued, and I think we need to focus on that a lot more.
I think we're starting to see people talk about that more. I guess what Simon Sinek and the whole
Yeah,
why stuff.
why.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes,
I think it's bringing that out more and more. So
yeah. In fact, I do that a lot. That is one of my big things as well. Why? And even on a more micro level, for example, I talked with one manager who came to me and said, "All right, we need to use Twitter for this one thing we're doing." And off the top of my head, I didn't think it was a good idea. So I just said, "Why?" Because my manager said we need to. Why? Well, the manager felt it was be the best thing for this. Why? And it's just why. And it was again and again. And I completely annoyed that person. Completely annoyed her. And by the end, she realized, oh my goodness, I'm just doing this blindly. I have no idea why. And actually, you're right. After asking me why so many times and me giving you the answers, those aren't good answers to have a Twitter account. We shouldn't be spending our time in Twitter right now. And really, all I did was ask why, and she came to that realization by herself. She goes, "Okay, stop asking me the question. I get it now." And then the funny thing is, we left the room, and she ran into one of her colleagues, and her colleague said, "Oh, do we have that Twitter account yet?" And she just kind of looked at me like, "Got it. I got this under control." It was awesome. So really getting to that purpose, not just doing things blindly, go be an accountant. Okay, I'm going to count the money, but why are you doing that? There's a deeper purpose, deeper meaning to that.
good, good. And I think that, and when we, like you said, set up the environment, but also help the employees understand the why,
Yes.
then they know why to move in a particular direction or how to engage in the right ways that'll make a difference. So
Absolutely.
they want to.
And yeah, they want to. And at that point, you don't need, if they understand that and are on board, you don't need as many rules and policies and guidelines. You can loosen up on those and say, you understand it, go make it happen. And you understand there are bounds. It doesn't mean free reign, woo, go do whatever you want. There are still bounds.
Sure.
Right? And by setting those bounds on the perimeter, not really in deep, but on the perimeter, and they understand their why, they can go and do the right thing for the customer, for each other, for the other employees, and just make it happen.
Very good. Very good. All right. So, any parting thoughts? I mean, that's some good conclusion right there. But what else? What else? Other thoughts that we haven't touched on that you think is an important point for folks to keep in mind? The managers, the folks that are listening to this podcast, to this video.
Yeah, one thing I do on my podcast is I ask the people to leave with a challenge. So I want to kind of do the same thing, as I want to give a challenge for everyone out there. And it's to really focus on your why, on your personal why. Why do you do what you do? Is it just because that's the job you got? Or is it because you love that thing? For example, I had a best friend who is an accountant. He loves it. It gets him excited, and I don't get that at all. No, I can't. That would drive me crazy. So, but it's the same thing, not only purpose, but also the environments that we're in. If it's not the right one for me, then maybe I need to go help fulfill my purpose somewhere else where the company is aligned with that purpose. Mm-hmm. I know one company who made it a policy never to fire anyone. And what they've done is that all of a sudden their hiring practices become much more real. And do you buy into what we're doing? Yes. Do you understand it? We are creating this kind of a change in the world. Are you on board with that? Yes, I am. Good. And then if it turns out not to be for them, they say, you have your purpose, obviously, of what you want to do. And we want to support you in that, but we're not going to fire you. Your job now is to go look for another job.
Wow.
And they will support them until they go find another job. And they'll be upfront and honest about it. Say, you know what, this isn't working out. That's okay. Let us help you go figure out what it is for you. Go do that. And so they'll go find another job. But if we find out what our purpose is and make sure our purpose is aligned with others, then that congruency will help us love what we do. And again, it's not just about loving what we do. That's a result of understanding what our purpose is. And if you don't have a purpose, I would find one. I found too many people I don't know what it could be a life purpose, or it could just be a work focused purpose, and that's okay. But as long as you're working towards something that you enjoy doing, or have that as an element of what you're doing, that it makes all the difference in the world.
Beautiful. Great challenge for us. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for your time, for your wisdom, for your great stories, and tune in next time for another podcast here with Kelly and whatever special guest we have.
Thanks, Kelly.
This podcast was brought to you by Bigger Brains, online training that won't bore you to tears. Expand the minds of your workforce at getbiggerbrains.com. For more information about Kevin and his work, be sure to head over to his website, vinjones.com. Kevin mentioned during our interview the idea of human-centered design. You can actually download a toolkit from Ideo's website at ideo.com/work/human-centered-design-toolkit and an /. Thanks for tuning in to Permission to Speak. If you want to increase collaboration and innovation in your organization, check out more resources available at speakingpractically.com or give me a call, Kelly Vandever, at 770-597-1108.